Welcome to Solutions with Courtney Anderson. I am your host and guide, Courtney Anderson. In our episode today, our topic is Help, Situation, Spotlight. I feel like I will never be successful. What can I do? So this is a really interesting topic. The concept that someone would feel that they will never be successful. What can I do? And I'm interested to sort of see what we can do to reclaim this sort of concept of success. So the whole question, right? The whole question of I feel like I'll never be successful. What can I do? It's predicated upon some sort of a definition of success. Because if you feel like you are not this thing called success, and then you think that you will, quote, never be this thing, then that tells me that you know what it is, right? Because you're telling me that you're not it now, and that you quote, will never be it. Then my question would be, well, what is it? What is it? And I am riveted by this idea that the concept of success can define not just how we see ourselves, but it can define how we alter, it can alter and define how we see everything in life. It defines how I see myself, how I see my people in my life on a daily basis, family or friends. It will define how I see everything that happens. Did something great happen at work? Oh, it doesn't matter. I'm a failure. Did something horrible happen? Oh, yeah, well, I'm not surprised. That's how life is. So this concept is, like I said, I'm riveted by it. And I just read a piece recently, and there's been, so many of these over the years, but it was another one of these sort of confessions of someone who's incredibly, wealthy. And so it was a person mostly sharing about their wealth. I think they also had some other prestigious job title and some other educational accomplishments. And so they were sort of sharing this narrative, and the person was sort of saying that they had, they were achieving these incredible amounts of money, millions of dollars a year, which is a lot of money. And they still felt they didn't have enough, right? That there wasn't enough. They needed more. It wasn't enough. And that, I'm sort of extrapolating that out to argue, well, then they must have not felt successful, right? Because if I had, a situation where I was earning, $200,000 a month, just a couple $1 million, and I felt that that wasn't enough, right? Then that means I'm upset because somebody else has more. And the whole question of I feel like I'll never be successful, it's, to me, loaded, with the answer. If you feel like you're not successful, then you probably can't have anybody argue legitimately with your own conclusion about yourself. If you feel like you aren't this thing and you feel like you will never be this thing, I don't know what anyone else could do to come in and change that narrative. You've answered the question when you posed it. You said that's how you feel. And the only measurement that matters in this whole type of interaction and discussion about, quote, success is what you think. You're the arbiter of what qualifies as success. And I was mentioning an article I'd recently read, and I've read so many of them, and, because there's this whole argument, right? I've said this, I don't know how many times in presentations and things, because a lot of times I'll go to a workplace, right? Let's say I'm going to a workplace, so maybe it's a government agency, maybe it's a corporation, maybe it's a nonprofit, it doesn't matter. And the people are unhappy. So whenever I see that, it tells me we've got some policy situations, we have some communication challenges, we have some leadership challenges, because I shouldn't see the majority of people, expressing misery. So to me, that's a top-down type problem. And so what that means is that there needs to be change in either leadership or the leaders need to learn new skills because, they should be able to communicate and share and create an environment where people feel, right, more positive. So when I go somewhere and almost everybody I talk to is just, in misery, then we have an organizational problem. We have a leadership problem. So the interesting thing about, success is I get to these places, and a lot of times we're talking about this, and organizations bring me in, either because things are really great, so let's make it better, let's improve engagement, let's get fired up, let's, give us some data and some tools and techniques of what we need to do, and I create whole customized solutions, and it's fun and great, and I love it. I learn a lot, too, about all different types of, organizations, which I love that stuff. And sometimes it's the opposite. Things are horrible, right? There's been a lawsuit, we're on the verge of bankruptcy, we're about to go out of business, we had a horrible reduction in force, everybody's, in a really bad place emotionally, and now you can come here. Because I typically am perceived, I think rightfully, because that's what my expertise is, and, really, difficult, challenging situations, and I'm going to create and come up with some potential solutions and try to implement them, bring me the hard cases. And the hard ones are, how do you make a great place better, right? Because they're already great. And how do you take a place that's just, mired in all types of multiple layers of challenges and turn that around? So when we come to this situation, a lot of times when I'm in the place where everybody's angry and unhappy, the people that work there will start telling me, look, don't come here and give us all this stuff about, we have choices and we can work somewhere that we want to work, and if we don't want to work somewhere, we don't have to, and all this kind of garbage. And people say to me, look, I don't have any money. I can't go anywhere else. And depending on the place I am, and depending on how bad the situation is, maybe not just at that location, but also in the region, the geographic region, or the year that I'm there, right? So depending on, what's happening in the global economy, what's happening in the local economy, how bad economically is that, part of the world, people get sometimes really frustrated and say, don't come here and tell us anything. We can't do anything. That's why we're mad, right? We're mad because this place is horrible and people are horrible and they do all these horrible things. On top of it, I don't have any money, so I have to come here, and I now have to listen to you. I have often responded, depending on the situation, how I say it differs, but my core message is, okay, well, if money is the answer, then all rich people would be happy, right? All rich people are, if success is defined by stuff like money and titles and, then if you had money, you'd be successful, you'd be happy, right? So all rich people are happy. And then, now, exactly. And I was mentioning this article I'd read, because I just read it recently, and it was somebody who was, like I said, I think it was a person who'd worked on Wall Street in the U.S. in the financial sector, talking about this, disproportionate amount of money that they've made based on their age and what they actually did, in terms of the work itself, but it was a very competitive environment, and they felt that they at some point weren't, earning what they felt they were worth, and then that became an addictive process that they felt no matter how much they earned, they always wanted more. And I think that's my argument to when I go to people who are really angry and start telling me they don't have choices. My argument is we always have choices. Are they great choices? No. I'm not. Of course not. I'm not. Delusional or naive or just a complete and total idiot. Of course they're not great choices. But there's some choices. It's the same. It's not exactly the same, but it's a similar situation that I always felt as an attorney when I was dealing with domestic violence cases, and somebody, is telling me a horrible thing. Their wife, ran over them with a car intentionally, right? Tried to kill them. Their husband, threw him down a flight of stairs or whatever. Like all these horrible things. I had one case, the lady. She sort of attacked her elderly mother-in-law and said she was just trying to help her do the dishes and trying to correct her, and she, threw her on the ground and, broke some bones. I mean, I've seen all this type of stuff, and, the argument is, okay, it's horrible. I mean, these are horrible situations. My argument was there are some choices. They're not great. I get it. I understand that, if you're in a very bad situation and you have limited resources, going to a shelter or social services or something is not really awesome. It's not like a great option. I get that. But my point in trying to have the dialogue and getting very passionate and excited is, if you don't see any choices, then there's nothing that anyone can do. If you're, by definition, this is it, and you're just going to stay here and just continue to take this, then I can't implement a solution because we're not able to work together. You won't change a single variable. And if you won't change anything, then the only way to change things is to change things. So when I deal with people in workplaces and family situations, and they started to get into this narrative of a lack of choices, that things are, determined and predetermined, and that's it, then I respect it. I am grateful and appreciative to have lived long enough to understand that, first of all, look, I know what I don't know. Other people, you are the expert on your life. You literally are, because you are you. You've been with you, from the beginning. You're still with you, hopefully, unless there's some sort of, very unusual psychological, condition that develops. You should be with you all the time, all the way through the end, right, of your physical existence. So I'm trying to come to the concept of how much power and authority we have to create what is. What I mean by that is not some sort of, magical thing that I wish there was a rainbow outside, and I'm going to wish and have these certain techniques, and boom, there's a rainbow. I mean, maybe people can do that. I can't. But if it comes down to things like, am I successful? All right, is this the right job for me? Is this the right location for me? Is this the right relationship for me? There is a lot. I would argue the majority of the outcome is based on your definition, your actions, of course, and your perceptions, which drive your actions. So if someone believes that they're not successful right now, then that already answers a whole bunch of the question for me. Because my question would be, well, how do you know you're not successful now? And usually what people will do in that part of an interaction will be to start immediately comparing themselves to other people, which is what I was referring to in this article I read, right, where somebody who's making a couple $100,000 a month starts explaining that they were really unhappy and felt unsuccessful and stressed out, that they needed more. And it wasn't necessarily because they felt like that number wasn't enough. It was that other people were making more. So in the article the person was sharing. I read another article just today where it was somebody who had been a legal professional for many years in a big fancy organization with a big fancy job title, and it's embarrassing. I don't know the person, obviously. This is a big national or international publication, but they were showing how this person with a big job title and had been in this field for many, many decades was bankrupt because the person had to file for bankruptcy, which is when you go to court in most countries. In the U.S., you go to federal court and you basically say, hey, look, I cannot pay all my bills. And you have to list them, though. When you do this, you have to publicly list what they call schedules. When a person goes, they file something under the part of the bankruptcy law called Chapter 7. That's for people. And you literally have to, I did these for my clients, and I have a lot of experience with this area. You have to literally fill out pieces of paper and show, hey, here's all the people I owe, and here's what I owe them. And then you have to list other pieces of paper and talk about, here's what I have. And obviously you don't, you have less than what you owe. And this article I read today was interesting because a person made like $30,000 a month. But then they started to say that the person, made $30,000 a month, but the person had, child support of, like $10,000 a month, right off the top. And then the person had, taxes, and then the person, lived in a really expensive part of the world, and so by the time it was all done, out of the $30,000 a month they got from their, they were in at their job every month, the regular paycheck, the person, was in the negative a couple $100. There's nothing. They're behind. And that was exactly, that article is one of the reasons why, and I was looking at what show episode to produce today. I had to do this episode because that, it's just, it just proves the point, right? You're never going to be successful if you think you're not successful. And it doesn't matter if somebody's paying you $30,000 a month, or they're paying you $3.85 an hour. Like I made it my first, paying job long time ago. You just made your decision. Now, are there bad outcomes along the way? If somebody has a sad and painful divorce and a child support order that's really high, although that's only about a third. And I have to say, and I practiced law, for many, many, many years in Texas, but it starts at 25%, right? in that range for your first child, and it goes up from there. So a third isn't necessarily that unusual. I mean, the challenge is this, and we've all seen this with how many entertainers, and that's where a media narrative drives so much of the popular culture, right? We love to see how people fall, right? Because this whole concept of success. So the question, in our episode, title is, I feel I'll never be, successful. Okay, well, if you feel that, part of my argument would be, then I guess that's true, because you feel it, and you're you, and you know you. But in popular society, we love it. We love watching the mighty fall, right? So somebody who was famous, and you see it a ton with people who are, athletes, and they were entertainers, and, but a long time ago. And so they're, either older and you don't play that sport at that point, or they don't, usually engage in their type of activity they did when they were, more famous. And then we read about how they're broke and they're, and they're arrested, or, something horrible happens, somebody divorced them and they're sad. And people like that, right? That whole idea of sort of taking a bit of pleasure in other people's misery, Schadenfreude, right? The German in me, born in Germany. The whole idea is that I take a little bit of pleasure in watching somebody else's pain. The question is, if that's what you want, and if that is what you want, that you don't want to be successful, that you don't ever want to, quote, be successful, and that you like watching other people who used to be successful because it makes you feel better about yourself, then I can't disagree with it. I can't make an argument. And I actually don't even have a way to help. I want to be, I'm far too probably, I share anecdotes a lot, obviously, because I know them well. Whether or not I recall them 100% factually is neither here nor there, but they're real. And the other thing is, I don't have any embarrassment at all in sharing all of my struggles and failures and a lot of the things that I've learned, the hard way, because I think they're just as valid as the same, information I could give somebody about, how do you make sure that you have a strongly written and appropriate will, or this the best way for me to, analyze some legal concept or some business aspect. I think those things I'm competent and feel proud about, but I'm also equally competent and proud of, the totality of my life experience. So when we look at these types of things, none of us are immune from having these times where we feel like, I'm not really successful. And I share in the episode, write up for this show. And, that I do it myself. I'll sit there and I'll have a day where I'm not necessarily feeling my most super awesome. And I'll start to think, oh my goodness, you went to the store and you forgot to get the dog food, and now you got all the way back home and the dogs are upset and you're an idiot because you forgot to do that, and how could you forget this, and you even got a new app on the phone to help you remember and you still forgot. And look, everybody has these times where we get into these situations, and I refer to them in the show write-up notes, and of course the notes are at CourtneyAnderson.com, and then they're also everywhere else on the internet you can link to where we have this show. And the idea is that you get in this sort of mental cul-de-sac where you just sort of start going around in circles in your head, and usually they're things that aren't extremely helpful. So if you start telling yourself, oh my goodness, I can't believe I did that wrong, and I forgot that, or I messed up with this, then yeah, you could, if you want to and you choose to, sit there and feel, unsuccessful and like a horrible person, and we all get into that. I certainly, again, have had more than my fair share of that, depending on what's going on in my life. But the question for the topic is, it's somebody who says they'll never be successful. And that is where I do sort of depart from sort of this sort of general human situation that we all have when maybe we're not having the greatest day. And like I said, we get into that thought cul-de-sac, which is just a little road that's at the end. There's nowhere else to go. And we just sort of go in circles in that same little road on our thoughts. We all do that. I mean, everyone does that at times. There's not a person I've ever met or worked with or known of who hasn't. Everybody does that. That's just normal sort of human, the condition. And we think a lot. I did a whole show on, the 70,000 thoughts a day that are moving through our brains on average. Just a lot of thoughts. So it makes sense that, some of that might be a little bit of self-wallowing and, oh, goodness, I failed at this. I'm not a success, right? The question is, having an experience of being, quote, unsuccessful, does that define me as a person as being completely unsuccessful? And then does that shackle me to a future as far as the end of time where I will never be successful? And my argument is that is where the part about the choice comes in, which is what I was in my example saying, I go to organizations, people are angry with me and say to me, I can't leave. Or I deal with someone who's in an unhealthy and literally dangerous personal relationship, and they're expressing to me, I can't leave. I don't want to go to a shelter. I don't have any choices. And my point was that if somebody believes that, then I don't know what I can do. Because if someone has made the decision that this is it, then I don't have the power or authority or ability to force them to do something different. And that is the same framework that I'm applying to the situation with, if you believe that you will never be successful, if you feel like that, which is what the topic title says, and that's what people, express to me, I feel like I'll never be a success. My argument is everything that you feel is a choice. In terms of how you interpret your world and what your decision is, it's a choice. So I read another article earlier today. It was very short. It was a piece by a medical doctor, who was saying that I think they were in their 30s, so a relatively young person. They'd been diagnosed with some very apparently lethal form of cancer, and it was saying how initially the person had asked their doctors, what's the prognosis? Like, how much do I have, right? Do I have 2 months? Do I have a year? And then the person was sharing how that they were going to do different things in life depending on how much time they had, right? So if I only have a few weeks or, a few months, I'll just go at home right now and be with my, loved ones. If I have a year, maybe I'll, finish the great American novel or whatever other activity I'd always dreamed of doing. And it was interesting because, of course, the person being a medical professional themselves knows that, there are no guarantees, and nobody knows, definitively, like you're going to die in, 18 days and 2 hours. And that initially that there was some, kind of, depression and really negative impact, because it was sort of like, well, how do I plan? I don't know how much time I have, right? Do I try to, take my medicine and get this aggressive protocol and work a little, or do I go home and just take whatever little bit of time I have with my family? But the interesting thing the author was saying was that at some point the realization that, well, all of life, before this diagnosis is sort of the same, right? Like all of us are dying, or we're an organism that has an expiration date on us. That's to the best of my knowledge. At this point, just the parts of our body that are machine-like, or at some point they wear out, right? And then of course we could also become susceptible to some other type of illness or disease or infection or whatever. So the point was that the person was saying, I didn't know before how much time I had, but it wasn't really bothering me, right? Now I have this really serious situation with my cancer, and I was yearning for some sort of certainty, but I'd never had it before. And the person was saying something like, they were going to make a choice, at least at the time they wrote this, to just, sort of one day at a time and keep keeping on, until they're not. And I found that in a way to be somewhat, believe it or not, related to my point in this entire show. And my point in the show is simply this. Success is defined by you. You define it. If you're going to define it by what somebody else is doing, then it's really not success. It becomes some sort of, oh my goodness, peer group situation, or a societal or cultural value. It's not about you then. Your own internal definition of success should be the prominent definition, if not the only one that really matters. Because even if you say, look, my definition of success is I never have to worry about money again. I never have to worry about it. Okay, that's a good definition. You still have to put work into it. Because as I shared earlier with some of these anecdotes and articles, you could make, $30,000 a month, $30,000 a month. That's not, obscenely, wealthy, but it's really wealthy. I mean, the average individual per capita income in the United States per person, everybody, men, women, everybody, that's not, that's over, not a child, is somewhere around, $27,000 a year. So if somebody's making $30,000 a month is making more than the average person makes in a month that somebody makes in a year. And for them to argue that they can't live on that and now they're bankrupt, I understand it, because money is all relative. You can be bankrupt on $30,000 a month. You can be bankrupt on $300,000 a month. You can be bankrupt on $3 million. I mean, it doesn't matter. If you're spending more than you make, you're broke. I mean, that's just. I read another article about an athlete had actually gone to the college I went to and been very successful in college. I remembered it because it was a big deal in that college community and town, and the alumni. They're always sending all these letters asking for more, donations. It's a great, academic college, and I just read an article about that person also being bankrupt and getting into all this trouble, even though they had been a professional athlete and made millions and whatnot. It's the same story. It doesn't matter if it's somebody that's, worked on Wall Street, or it's somebody that was a fancy job, or it doesn't matter. The point is, if you spend more than you make, then you're going to be broke. Broke just means I spend more than I make. It doesn't matter how much you make. And my argument is success is also not dependent on some specific metric that's external. In other words, I can't be rich, if I spend more than I make. Now, of course, some people will say, well, of course not. That's why we define, wealth by having a certain amount of, liquid assets that are investable, that are not tied to real estate. And that's how we determine assets, and we determine certain customer profiles for our, banking services or private wealth services. Well, yes, I understand that, but that's why a lot of times people who should be comfortable financially aren't, because they perceive that they're not successful because they start measuring everything by what everybody else has. And my argument is, whether it's somebody who makes $30,000 a month, or they make $30,000 a year, or they make $3,000 a year, the success can't be external, because you'll never win that game. There's always someone who has more. As humans, I read these global lists, and of course I'm out and doing business around the world. I love it. I love learning about our world and how different people run organizations, and I love it. So, but we have a global list, right? Who's the wealthiest person in the world? Is it Bill Gates? Is it Carlos Slim? Is it, tell me who it is? What country are they from? And the list changes, and then somebody else is more wealthy. And my point is that even if you hit the pinnacle, and that's your measurement, it's still not guaranteed forever, right? Because nobody stays there, number one, forever. People come and go up and down, maybe you're in the top two. You cannot tie a definition of success to some external metric, whether it's the number one wealthiest, or the number one ranked tennis player in the world, or the number one PTA leader in your neighborhood, or the person who had the best children in your social club. Or you can't tie it to these things. It has to be something internal, that is something that's more constant. And my argument is as simplistic and hokey as it sounds, but it's a whole part of why I have, frame what I do, practicing the joyful art of business, is that if something feels good to you, if you feel good about yourself, that's success. So if I feel, I did a great job. I folded the clothes that I had, done laundry, and then I took a nap, and I feel good. You know what? I'm a success. Or whatever it is in your world. Why not own the fact that you're doing something? Anytime you start focusing on this, what other people have, or what you think you don't have, you will never win. You're right. You will never be successful. And neither will I, or anybody else, probably on the planet or in the universe, because there's always going to be somebody else. So why do we do this? I've got a show coming up, and its title is, "In a fight against yourself, you will always lose. So stop." And it ties into this. If you want to be successful, just claim it. You are. If you don't, then don't. But it's up to you. Thank you so much for joining me. You can always come to CourtneyAnderson.com, where we're posting all of the shows, show notes, links to some of the things that I discuss, and resources. And again, I really appreciate you. And I'm going to just say it. I think you're a success. I think I'm a success. I think we are successes. There you go.